Tell you what, let's kick off with another quote. With enough time, nothing is unhackable. Really don't know who said this one, but it's a great statement. We just hacked Android. Let's talk about hacking for iOS and its products. Now, please note that I'm not going to get in depth, #nerdy here. This isn't a course for iOS. What I'm about to talk about is designed to give you the very basic understanding of the iOS platform. When it comes to the architecture itself, it's unique, but like Android, it has several different layers. The iPhone operating system, or iOS, is the platform that Apple uses for iPhones, iPads, iPods, and other iDevices. It's an integrated system, and Apple doesn't allow iOS to be implemented on non-Apple devices. iOS is simply an intermediary between the hardware and applications. And applications are not supposed to try to access the hardware directly. Instead, they go through several different layers of the architecture. Let's now drill down to each one so we have a better understanding. We first have the Coca application layer. It's a very important layer. It's the main one, the one that most developers deal with. It's responsible for the interface that we see standardized throughout all the Apple platform. It's also in charge of the text kit, which is what oversees the handling of text in a way that the text is formatted, paragraphs, columns, etc. It's also in charge of our push notification services, so we can push notifications out that you've got an email message or a text message, or even the badge on your icon that says you've got a notification. Next, we have the media layer. I bet you can't guess what this is for. This layer oversees several technologies that deal, with media. What you see on the screen, the camera, audio, 2D, 3D. In fact, it uses OpenGL and GLKit to oversee both the 2D and 3D rendering. We then have the core service layer. This layer has different features associated with it, such as the peer-to-peer services, which your device uses to connect and initiate a connection to other devices that are nearby. This is mostly used in games and sharing images. Maybe you want to send your photo to another friend that has an iPhone. We then have the core OS. This layer contains the low-level features, which most other technologies are based. Frameworks at this layer are useful when dealing with security or communicating with external devices, hardware, networks. The services provided by this layer are dependent of the kernel and our device driver layer, which gets us to the kernel and device drivers layer. This is the lowest layer of the iOS architecture. It includes just what it says: the kernel, the drivers, BSD, file system, infrastructure technologies, such as networking, even access to DNS services and Bonjour. Well, we got the nerdy stuff out of the way. Let's move on to jailbreaking. As far as locking down the Apple platform is concerned, when it comes to jailbreaking devices, even though we open a plethora of options that Apple doesn't necessarily want you to have access to, you just need to know what those ramifications can include, because I now gain access to the device remotely if need be. Think of that from the attacker's perspective. For me, the biggest issue is still the physical level. If an attacker gets physical access to any device, Apple, Android, PC, laptop, server, whatever, we need to take into consideration what risks might come into play as we move around with these devices. So we need to secure down the hatches. How do we do that on an Apple platform or iOS? Well, first, make sure that we passcode lock the device. I know that's a duh, Dale statement, but I need to say it. Don't allow people to sideload apps. Make sure that we disable JavaScript and add-ons from your web browser. Avoid storing sensitive data on the device. This would include client-side databases. Listen, if you're gonna jailbreak, please change the default root password. It's Alpine. And if you haven't changed it, you don't know how to change it, you just root your phone, you're asking for problems. Configure the Find My Phone option so that it gets wiped if it's lost or stolen. And you've heard this from me throughout this entire series, and that is update, update, update. That's the OS and the apps, as well as any plugins. Disable the iCloud services to stop sensitive enterprise data from being backed up to your personal cloud. Make sure also that we enable Ask to Join networks so that you don't connect to rogue wireless networks. As I mentioned before, enable the erase data after 10 attempts. Listen, if you don't get it within 10 attempts, then there's something else going on. Turn off your Siri. She doesn't need to be listening and logging things at all times as you talk about personal as well as organization information. While you're at it, let's turn off voice dial. Attackers can access the phone without entering a passcode if it's enabled, and they have physical access to your device. Do you see why I keep saying the physical's the big part for me? And some of the protections we saw in Android, like secure networks and 2FA and encrypting the device and staying off of public Wi-Fi's. And please, please stop clicking on email links. All apply here. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to seeing what you remembered.